evening and welcome to the September 17th meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Honorable James Cowhey.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Waldeck.
Here.
Alderman Moore is absent. Alderman Pandaleon.
Here.
Alderman Schoenheider.
Here.
Alderman Tack. Here. Alderman Palmer. Here. Alderman Adelman.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Karina. Will you please join me in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business this evening is reports of city officers, the first being comments by mayor. I'm pleased to announce that we have, looks like the whole group here, or the whole troop here, I should say, of the Girl Scout Troop 1017. We're honoring them this evening for earning their Silver Award. And I understand someone from the troop is going to read the names of the girls who achieved this award, and I will hand them out. Is that correct?
Well, while they're moving in, can I just describe a little bit about what we did?
Oh, most definitely.
All right. We met a parishioner, a brand new parishioner said, hey, do you know of a group that could maybe get a protective vest for our police dog in Lake Forest? And first of all, our first question was, we have a police dog in Lake Forest, and boy, do we have a group that could get a protective vest. So we started working with Girl Scouts USA, and we broke up into 4 different groups. We've got 18 at the time, and we put on a self-defense class for girls. We did a princess party. We did a 5K Dunkin' Dash, and then later on we're going to set up a pet food pantry up in Waukegan. But we got to meet the best people in Lake Forest. We got to meet great people from City Hall, from the police department, from the rec department, and all of the businesses that we talked to. People were so supportive. So we thank everyone, and we were able to help Officer Andy Shue and his partner Duncan, who got his name actually in the Dunkin' Donuts, when he was looking at the sign that said, America runs on Dunkin'. He goes, no, I think America runs from Dunkin'. And that's how his name was built. So these are our girls. Are you guys going to read off the names? Over here. Yeah. Presented with the basket. So Duncan doesn't do most of his work in Lake Forest. He is in the Lake County MEG Task Force, which is multi-jurisdictional law enforcement group focusing on illegal drugs, gangs, weapons offenses. So it's not the hard streets of Lake Forest that we're protecting him from. Sure.
See how he likes it.
He's not used to wearing it, it's heavy.
Against bullets and knives. This toy, you're paying more attention to camera people.
Well, thank you, girls, and I think it's safe to say the dog stole the show once again, so. Our next item of business this evening is a resolution of appreciation for Robert Zacher for 20 years of service. And I'd like to read the resolution and present that to Robert. Whereas Robert M. Zacher has been a dedicated employee of the City of Lake Forest since September 8, 1992, and whereas Robert M. Zacher will honorably retire from the city on September 9, 2012, whereas Robert Zacher served in the following positions during his dedicated career: accident investigator, youth officer, evidence technician, bike officer, officer in charge, and field training officer. Whereas during his career with the city, Robert Zacher was instrumental in the creation of crime prevention programs directed toward the youth of our community. These programs were designed to present police officers in a non-enforcement environment. And these include the First School Resource Officer, the Teen Court Liaison, Leaders Program, the Donut Bowl with Croya, that was an important one, Lake Forest Police Department Baseball Clinic, and whereas during his career at the city, Robert Zacher received the following awards. First being 5 Police Department Accommodation Awards, the second being 2 Honorable Mention Awards, and the third being a Life Saving Award. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Lake Forest that the council, on behalf of the administration and residents of the community, hereby express its appreciation and gratitude to Robert Zacher for his public service faithfully performed, and be it further resolved that the city clerk be and hereby is instructed to deliver a copy of this resolution duly signed by the mayor to Robert Zacher the 17th day of September 2012. I'd ask for,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution passes, and Robert, are you here? Come on up.
Bob, do you want to use the microphone and tell everybody what you're doing in your next life?
Actually, I have a prepared statement by my writing staff. I'm moved on to Cowhey Logistics. They were actually in Lake Forest for 4 years, and they kind of expanded rapidly in their downtown Chicago now. So I accepted the position of Director of Security for them. It is a bright and early job, 6 a.m., so it's a great opportunity, and I'm excited about it. The last 2 months kind of been a little bit crazy for me in the city. When they announced that I was leaving, and word kind of spread throughout the town. People have been very generous with their words, and I want to say thank you. I want to thank my family, my mom, and my stepfather, my sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, my wife Robin, my son Nick, my daughter Allison. You've supported me throughout my career and forever grateful. Many successes I've achieved would not have been possible without you. To the council and the community, I want to thank you very much for this wonderful honor. I have greatly appreciated the opportunity afforded me to serve in the community in which I grew up. For those who don't know, I was born and raised in Lake Forest. I've enjoyed the past 20 years and I have great respect for my colleagues in the police department, who many are here. It's a great group of people. Our new chief, we're going to meet in a second, Jim Held, who's been a friend for long. I've been a police officer, and I think it'd be a great opportunity for him in the city. And all the community leaders. All of you have been great partners in my career in promoting safety, well-being, and community involvement. Near and dear to my heart, I've truly enjoyed working with the youth in the community through work as a high school officer, department baseball clinic, and yes, everyone has asked me this question 4,000 times. We are looking at having a clinic next year. So that's been a big topic. It'll be, I think, the 15th annual clinic up at Hallis Hall. We get about 235 kids and about 70 volunteers. So it's been successful. I think we'll continue it. The Croya Bowl with Todd Nahigian and I started that program when I first became at the high school. It was intermixing the kids and the police together playing flag football. And afterwards we meet at Croya and give the kids a chance to kind of talk to us about things that they have concerns about in a one-on-one type environment that wasn't anyone in a uniform or it was a very laid-back type session, and I think it was very successful. And I just want to say I'm safe to say I can retire from my career as a police officer knowing I helped my community and hopefully made a difference for the city of Lake Forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and we wish you the very best in your new position with Coyote Logistics, and we know you'll still be in the neighborhood and in the area, so thank you for all you've done for the city.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda this evening, I'm pleased to report, is an appointment of the new city marshal and collector, or commonly known as the police chief. And as the community has been aware that our last chief, Joe Berger, stepped down to accept a position in the private sector, and we went out to a national search. We had over 100 applicants. Came down to 2 individuals, one from outside the community and one from within the community. And we're pleased to announce that the council and the committees that were involved selected Jim Held to be our new police chief. We're very honored to have Jim. He's been with the the force for a very long time. He's very familiar with the community. We feel comfortable with him, he's comfortable with us, and we're also very confident in his ability going forward. I know he's got a lot of work to do, but we know he's going to do a great job. So Jim, we welcome you in your new position, and we wish you the best of luck going forward. I'd like to ask for a recommendation from the council to approve this new appointment.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jim, congratulations.
You want to say a few words? Sure. We know you're a man of few words, so go ahead.
Yes, you know me well. I know you're running along here too. I want to thank the mayor, city council, Mr. Cowhey, for this opportunity. I do look forward to it. It's going to be a challenge, and I am definitely honored to lead this department and to go in the direction that we want to go. There are great individuals in the Lake Forest Police Department, the public safety building. I know that it's going to be a transition that everybody's going to be happy with. I have to make some thanks. My wife, sitting back there, Kelly, my son Eric, my other son's away at school, not just for going through the process, but for the 27 years they've kind of put up with the hours and the being gone and all that. Also, Fire Chief Howell, I think, is in the back someplace there. Great supporter through the whole process. Good friend, Chris Garrison, Kevin Esso from the fire department, and also Mike Hosking, who's in the back with his wife Carol. Again, great support through the process. I really do appreciate everything they've done for me, not just through this, but through my career. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I look forward to this opportunity.
Thank you, and that concludes my comments. Our next item on the agenda this evening is comments by City Manager. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Before we get into the items on the posted agenda, I did want to invite forward a couple of special guests that we have here this evening. As you know, there's been an awful lot going on at the high school district these days, and we have with us this evening the President of the High School Board, Sharon Golan, the Vice President, Jim Carey, and also our new School Superintendent, Mike Simic. So if I could ask them to please come forward and give us an update as to where we're at with the negotiations.
Thank you, Bob, Mr. Mayor, and City Council. It's been a long day. I'm going to have to do some reading and use my glasses at this point. We are here this evening to provide you with current information on the Lake Forest High School strike situation. We recognize how unfortunate this is for our community. Be assured that the Board of Education is doing everything in its power to resolve this conflict. More importantly, the district staff has been able to continue to provide educational offerings for our students. Last week, during the first 3 days of the strike, up to 600 of our students continued to arrive at school each day, and these were non-attendance days. They worked in the library, the media center, they took ACT and SAT prep tests, they wrote college essays, rehearsed for the fall play, practiced their music, took to the pool, and took to the playing fields. Today, 1,400 students attended school and took part in full-day instructional activities. We had 63 certified staff, over 50 community volunteers, 20 teaching assistants, and guest speakers. We had special education professionals delivering their services as well. Our students remain our #1 priority. We, the board, have unprecedented support from our parents and our community. We will continue to work for them during this difficult time. Tonight, in answer to community questions, We would like to show you details of the proposal the board has on the table and why we stand behind our offer. I would like to introduce Jim Carey, Vice President of the Board of Education and Board Chairman of our Finance Committee.
Good evening. I think Harry Griffith and I were here several months ago to talk about the current state of the school budget. At that time, one of the provisos for getting back to black was to negotiate a new contract with the teachers, our teachers union, that reflected current economic conditions. The previous contracts had been pretty rich, but they were struck in a different economic era. So throughout the negotiations that have been going on since last March, we've been striving to really bend the cost curve down. I think I mentioned at that time, probably much like the city, our primary source of revenues is property taxes. As we've all experienced, with little growth in the property tax base, we are restricted in terms of how we can grow our budget, and that growth is capped based on the Consumer Price Index. Because it's based on the CPI from a few years ago, we already know that for the current fiscal year we're in, our growth is capped at 1.5%. For the next school year, starting next September, or actually July 1, 2.7%. And currently the CPI is running about 1.5% for the third year. And we are in the process of trying to negotiate a 3-year contract. There are 3 areas of major difference. The first one, of course, as you might expect, is compensation. The teacher compensation model is premised on the concept of STEP, which is a reward for being on the staff and having 1 more year of experience. It varies depending on where you are on the salary scale, but by and large, for our teachers, the cumulative step, or the average step across the workforce, is 2.6%. So when you think about it, in our case, we've said to the union, for the current year, we can offer you 2.6, which is basically a step, recognizing that that is in excess of the Consumer Price Index, but we'll find the difference through savings elsewhere. They have asked for 5%. For the second year of the contract, we've offered them a little bit more, bringing the total up to 3.35%. They've asked for 5.75%. And it goes on even for the next year. In general, the LFEA, our teachers union, is asking for twice what CPI is, and that's way more than we can make up through other cost savings. When we talk about compensation, I think it's important because you've seen comments probably on some of the various news services about will we have trouble attracting and retaining high-quality teachers, and we expect high quality. First of all, our teachers are paid at the highest level amongst their peers in the state. We have absolutely no trouble retaining teachers. I think last year we lost 2. We have no trouble attracting new teachers when we do need to fill a slot. When we had a spot open about 5 months ago, we had 600 applications for 1 spot. More recently, we had 1 opening and we had over 1,000 applications for that spot. Good quality teachers want to teach in a district that's got family and financial support like Lake Forest. So as we're talking through this with the union, the one thing we've said is we don't feel like we've got a problem today with what we pay. We think the offer that we have on the table will continue to enable us to pay at the highest levels, and that will enable us to ensure that we have ongoing quality and retention of our existing staff. And if we have openings, we'll be able to attract replacements. The second area of difference is when it comes to health insurance. This is a very busy chart, but let me just focus on the yellow. Over the years, we have tried to get the union members to absorb some of the cost of health insurance. If you look at the right-hand column, in their proposal, they have asked for us to reverse that and basically have the taxpayers pay a larger contribution towards their health insurance, particularly as it comes to PPOs. A number of years ago, we made an effort to switch from higher cost PPO health insurance and incent the teachers to move to an HMO. That's been in place probably for about 10 years. We've, as part of that incentive, we offered them free family HMO, free individual and free family. We have asked that they absorb 10% of that cost, which we think is modest. They have refused that thus far in the negotiation. The second, the bottom tier for new employees, you know, one of the things we've tried to do where possible is grandfather through existing employees, but make some changes that are going to really help us down the road insofar as managing our expenses. We've got a couple of plans that we have every reason to believe under the Affordable Care Act will be defined as Cadillac tax plans. We don't want to be paying penalties for those. So one of the things we've offered up to the union is grandfather through the existing employees, but anybody new coming through is precluded from taking those two plans. The board has rejected that in whole. I'm sorry, the union has rejected that. They feel that everybody ought to have the same benefit package afforded, provided to them. The last thing that we've brought up is the idea of a dual salary schedule. The idea here, once again, is to grandfather through the existing employees, about 140 of them, so that they can continue to get the step-type increases they might have gotten in the previous years, but to really slow down the pace of step increases for new employees. This is something that we think is quite fair because, again, the current employees are protected, but helps us, again, tamp down the glide path of our expenses going forward because we will have a number of retirees over the next 3 to 5 years. We will be bringing in replacements, and why not get them on a new scale that reflects the current economic environment as opposed to the past. That has become a major point of contention in the negotiation, as you probably read. In an effort to try to get a deal done, we have backed away from that somewhat and said, let's get a committee to start working on it with the idea of this being implemented late in the 3rd year or maybe even 4 years out. We think it's a step in the right direction. Highland Park, several other districts have already put these in place, so we're not breaking new ground insofar as traditional teacher board negotiations, but our union is having a very difficult time getting their heads around the idea that there would be a new scale. Part and parcel of this is the state has already changed the retirement laws for new employees, and we think in a way this is parallel to that. But again, it's been a very difficult concept for the union to accept. I think to kind of wrap this up, we're basically still in the midst of negotiation. Sharon's been there since 7 this morning, as have many of the other members of the board trying to negotiate something. It's not clear when we walked out the door to come over here tonight, not clear if we're going to have anything done today. Our teachers are in their 4th day of strike, and perhaps tomorrow will be the 5th. And I think that what has been said by Mike Simic, our new superintendent, as well as Jay Hoffman, is the administration is doing everything they can to protect the integrity of the educational program as best we can and ride through this very challenging situation. I think Sharon and I would take any questions you might have, or perhaps Mike Simic.
I understand that there's been unfair labor practices suit filed by you against the union.
I think that's correct. I think we've got suits going both ways. You know, we feel that the union has not negotiated in good faith during various parts of the process. They were unwilling to meet during the summer. We, on the other hand, were because we wanted to get a deal done before the school year, before the chance of the disruption that we're now obviously facing. The union didn't want to do that. And there's other charges. And again, they've got some points against us as well.
When will that be decided, and what are the possible results?
I don't think the outcome will be determined quickly. I suspect that in the final analysis, if both sides can come to an agreement on everything else, maybe those charges become moot and fall by the wayside. But I'm not an attorney, and this is the first time I've been involved in that aspect of it. But I think it's just part of the strategy.
I have a
Couple
question.
questions.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
But let me preface it by saying the school board is totally autonomous from city council, so appreciate your coming out tonight and enlightening us as to what's going on. I think it's real beneficial and important. And any questions or comments I make are more from a personal standpoint than in my capacity as an alderman. But I'm going to cut right to the chase. I know the airline industry years ago, I shouldn't say I know, I'm fairly certain, that they did the two-tier employment scale with the airline pilots and maybe even the flight attendants, but I know the airline pilots were subjected to that. It was reality check, and probably other industries too. At what point can you just say, we're done? We've been realistic, you haven't, we're done, you're all fired, like Ronald Reagan did with the air traffic controllers. And if you had 600 applicants for one position and 1,000 for another, we just go out and hire new teachers.
I think we'll turn this one over to our superintendent, Mr. Simic.
Welcome, Mike. Thank you. I'd like to make one thing clear. This is not my fault. That question has, Alderman, that question has been asked a number of times. Illinois labor law, as it relates to teachers and teacher tenure, prohibits punishing people, anyone going on strike. You're prohibited from punishing them for being on strike. So the ability for a school board to unilaterally at some point dismiss all of its employees because they are striking is a violation of Illinois state law.
So then we can fill their positions with substitutes, correct?
Yes, sir. You can. It is extraordinarily difficult to run. It's another question that many of our parents have had. Extraordinarily difficult to bring in 150 substitute teachers and try to replace the relationships that exist in a school building. The most important relationship in a school organization is a relationship between the teacher and the pupil. We had 50 of our students come in the other day and review the plan that we're currently implementing. And one of the first things that the students said was, look, don't try to do this with 150 substitute teachers. We don't think that will work. Now, there are things that we are developing that will have a large number of substitutes in them as a possibility, but we need additional assistance in order to do that. So we've got a variety of things that we're planning, but the ability for us to bring in 150 strangers into our school system and continue with instruction as students have known it and expect it is an unrealistic expectation.
Okay, I appreciate that. But what's also unrealistic is that I think almost everybody sitting on this board, on this city council, has probably taken salary reductions over the last 4 to 5 years. That's the real world. 87% of your revenues come from real estate taxes on houses that have been selling for 50 cents on the dollar, which means the real estate tax revenues are going to be declining unless the assessor has to raise the mill rates. So that's the reality, and it seems to me that it's paradoxical that our hands are tied behind our back in dealing with a solution to this problem, because our kids are the most important, not a teachers union, and not 5% or 6% annual increases. And I'll take it one step further. Our parents and our grandparents at one point were able to earn a living and set aside their savings and maybe one day retire because they took those savings and they invested them and they got a return on their investment. That paradigm is gone. You earn nothing on your savings. How can they expect 5 to 6% increases when you earn 0.1% on your investments today? So I think it's time to test the reality, even if it means you have to have a court of equity decide, weigh the balance, balance the equities here. And I'm speaking personally for myself and not on behalf of the council.
I have a question, just a quick one. I know that Jay Hoffman and his team have worked very hard, very long hours, very diligently to put together a meaningful educational experience for the kids, and for today, for tomorrow. How long can that continue? I mean, how long can at some point you can't run any more programs. The kids need to be back in class learning English and history.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Before I answer that, I would like to point out for this council and also for our citizens at home, the number of hours that our school board members have put in, as you do, in volunteer work. They receive no compensation for this, and an unimaginable amount of time and effort and care has gone into this. And they represent our community in very honorable ways, and it's taken a significant toll on them. To the question, the program we have right now looks like we will be able to do a good job until the end of the week. Today's program, we try to manage expectations a little bit, and you try to under-promise and over-deliver. I've had 2 students in the building myself, and use my conversations with my wife this evening. How'd it go? The star of the show, you'll be happy to hear, was your police dog. And whoever was with the police dog, I don't know if it was the officer that was here today, but that was a home run. Talked about Fourth Amendment. And another program that was a runaway hit today was a guest speaker talking about emotional wellness. As you know, we've had significant struggles with student suicide in our community, and that speaker addressed those sorts of struggles that adolescents have, and tremendously popular. I asked probably 10 or 15 kids, and 9 out of 10 said this was really, really worthwhile. The program that we have going forward will potentially be different than what you saw today. It depends on what happens, but we have a solid program, we believe, for the rest of this week and perhaps into next week, but obviously the longer we go, the tougher it gets. I do want to point out there's no school in the history of the state that has been able to do what our high school administrators, with tremendous assistance from the city and community members, have been able to do today. It's a great challenge, and so far so good. Today we had over 80% attendance at the school, and we expect to continue that. Is that an answer to your question? Yes or no? Somewhat.
Yes, somewhat.
Yes, somewhat. What would you like me to clarify?
I guess just in terms of, what's the plan for next week? I mean, at some point, is as great and meaningful an educational experience as today has been, I'm sure, for everyone, and as tomorrow will be, I'm sure, for everyone. At some point, a return to their, to regular, learning honors chemistry.
Right. Tomorrow's program will be similar to today, which was sort of a potpourri. Students had some choice. It'll be an improved program over today's program, actually. And I don't want to reveal too much about what our plan is in the future. I want to go sort of day by day because it does continue to evolve. We know we've had a significant number of questions, particularly about AP courses, that we need to have more emphasis on the math, science, history, English, the core, and we're working to that end right now. So I don't want to say too much because it is evolving, but I think I'm hearing the same concern from you that other parents have expressed. We do need to get to that core instruction, but there are various ways that we might get there.
Thanks very much.
Is there any effort to make students aware of accredited internet-based alternatives for those who just feel like, you know, this isn't for them, that they want to get going on their schoolwork and get approved credits and prepare for college?
There are programs that students are aware of. Actually, today we introduced the Khan Academy to all students in the district. If you're not familiar with that, that's certainly worth taking a look at. Also, Wolfram Alpha. It's another site that you can look at. Students are aware of those. I don't believe that there's a struggle constantly with quality with those programs, and there is an opportunity to continue those, but the quality of online programming is very hit or miss, and we do point those things out, but continuing their education through that means alone right now without guidance from their teacher is tough.
Are you still looking for volunteers to man the classrooms?
The volunteers are not manning the classrooms. They're offering support to our administrative staff and certified teachers. So the volunteers are not doing the teaching, but we've had so many people that want to come in and work with the kids and be in the building that, yes, if people want to volunteer, they can still call the volunteer number. Anyone who wants updated information should go to the high school website, which is lfhs.org. We're having updates about the strike and daily activities and athletics and the need for volunteers. So anybody that's interested can go there and get the name and number of who to call.
I have one quick question and then a comment. What is your normal attendance level on a given day?
Our attendance, we have 1,700 students, and we have about 96 to 98% normal attendance, and today we were north of 80%.
Okay, thank you. Just my own unscientific survey, I think it's fair to say that most residents in Lake Forest don't really understand that the school district and the city council are completely different, and we don't, they're really like two separate governments, if you will. So I think all of us probably have been buttonholed and stopped and just had things brought to our attention about this situation. Again, very unscientific sample, but a 100% support for what you're doing. And a lot, well, you've heard the comments by Alderman Adelman. I think that is a frequent refrain. Probably half the people that have stopped me to talk about this have said that. I've said, you need to talk to the school board. It's not our area, but I hear you. And then just speaking personally, this pattern of public employee unions holding governments and communities hostage for unrealistic pay that is completely inconsistent with what's happening in any other part of the economy has to stop. And thank you for doing your best on that in this little community here.
Thank you, Mr. Pandaleon. And again, call us, not them. That's all right. Although my husband did say, get home, the answering machine is full, and they are all in your favor. So we, as I said, we are getting unprecedented support from parents and community members. And I won't be able to respond to every one of them, but I want to thank them for their phone calls and their emails. So thank you, too.
Well, Sharon and Jim and Mike, thank you very much. I think to echo Mike's comments, I think unless you've been in those trenches, you don't understand how much time and effort and the toll it does take on individuals. And I know you didn't sign up for this when the caucus probably first came to you, but we appreciate all your efforts. Thank you. The next item on my agenda is a update on communications plan. You might know that we have what's called Red Center, which is a reverse 911 kind of emergency call system. And the chief, and I can now take interim off. Chief Held is here this evening, and he's going to brief us on the new system because it does require some involvement and interaction by our residents. So, Jim?
Yeah, this is we had a system that was called Code Red before, and while it was successful, it didn't do everything we wanted it to do. So we started looking around, and Global Connect was the name of the company that we came up with. It does more things. It's less expensive. The Code Red, we would get charged a surcharge if we went over the amount of calls. This doesn't do that. It's unlimited what we can use it for. But the key for this thing is it is only for emergency communications, emergency notifications to the community. Something, is something like, it could be a severe storm, a tornado, something along those lines. If we have an ongoing criminal activity in an area, we can notify the residents of that immediately. If there happened to be a school lockdown, we can notify the people in the area of the school. So that is the key, to know that it is only for emergency notifications. What it will do is it will send out, we will pre-record a message, and it will dial the phone numbers in its database and give that message out to that whoever answers, or an answering machine. We can program to call once, twice, 3 times. It's geared towards only 2 right now. So it'll send out thousands and thousands of calls a minute. So it's instantaneous as opposed to trying to do it individually or anything else like that. Again, it's used for severe weather. Maybe we've used it for watering bans. When we had over the summer, that was our first experiment with it, so to speak. We've used it, we're going to use it for missing children. We're going to use it for in-progress calls, like I said. And there's potentially a lot of different uses it can be used for. Something going on in the business district that we need to let the merchants know about. We can preload call lists, so it'll call a directed amount of people. If we say if there was a bank robbery, we could just notify the banks immediately, and they would know what was going on. You want to click it, Susan? That's what we talked about. One more. What we can do with it, we can put on our map on the screen of the computer, we can draw a radius, or say we want this call to go out within 2 miles of a specific address. So say the public safety building. And it'll call everything within that blue circle, all the numbers that are within that geographic blue circle, which is a really nice feature. We don't have to try and be too specific. We just say this is the radius we want. One more time, Susan. Or we can draw lines. This is a neighborhood. We can put lines, whatever street you want to go, this is the area you want to call. Again, if there's a missing child or something along those lines, this is where we're focusing what we're doing. So everybody there knows what we're doing. What it'll also do is also kind of help limit the calls we get in. So if there's an unusual amount of police activity in this area, typically people call us, say what's going on, which is great, but we'll be able to tell them before they have to call us, because we don't want our switchboard inundated with a lot of calls and try and explain to them what's going on. We will be more proactive and let them know what's going on so they're aware of it. The way to, next one. What we tried to do is when we implemented this, when we first started it, we had all the current AT&T lines in the city automatically put into the system. Now we found out with the watering ban that some didn't get in there, and that could be for various reasons. Some might have changed their number. So we had a little hit or miss, probably got 80% to 90% of the current AT&T lines. The problem with that is if people didn't have AT&T, they Comcast or a voice over internet type of a thing, those numbers are not in our database. So they'll need to go to the website and register their home phone. They can also register a cell phone. So all you have to do is click on the City of Lake Forest website, and Susan will show you where all that is right there.
As Jim mentioned, we have put this on the website and made it in a pretty noticeable spot. As you know, we are redesigning the website. It is not very aesthetically what we have in mind for the future, but it is right here. Click one time on there and register for the first time. You click there. Forget your password, you go there. I've lost it, sorry. So I will bring up my information.
While she's doing this, what's really nice too is it'll also give text alerts. If you sign up for text alerts, it'll also give a text alert. So we know that pretty much everybody texts these days, especially the younger people, so it'll give a text. You can sign up for an email alert also. And if you want to sign up a business line, you can sign up your business line. It doesn't not have to just be a home line or a cell phone.
So you can type in all your personal information here and set your preferences. As Jim said, you can have information go to your home phone number, additional phone numbers, cell phones, email addresses. You can get a call only, emails only. You can sign up for this special weather alert system if you'd like, and when you're done filling out all your preferences, you just click on update my information, and you can do this at any time as well. If you change phone numbers or email addresses, you can update it as often as you'd like. And this will pop up after you fill out your information so that your changes have been saved successfully. And we would like to encourage all residents to do this. And as a reminder, it is a change and an update from the Code Red system. So everyone should register on this, especially since a lot of us don't have AT&T phones. If you have Comcast phones or any other phone system, you would need to do this. So we encourage everyone to do this.
That'll be in a dialogue letter?
It was in the fall dialogue, yes. So we have extra copies of that if people need step-by-step instructions, but it's pretty easy to do.
And what we're going to do after the first of the year is, it's what's called an all-call. It's like a test call. So that'll give us an idea of how many lines there are. So it'll just be a call to all the lines that have registered. It'll just be, this is a test of the Emergency Notification Global Connect system. So that way people, they'll know what it is. So it won't, I don't want to say it won't frighten them when they first get it. And hopefully they'll talk amongst themselves, neighbors, friends, and say, did you get the call last night? And if somebody didn't, then they can at least go on and sign up. So if they haven't been informed about it, hopefully word of mouth will get on. We're doing what we can to advertise it to make sure that people are aware of it. So we want everybody to sign up, like Susan said, because it's very, very, very beneficial in these little emergencies that do happen in town. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim and Susan. Susan, you can stay right where you are, and I'll ask you to bring up the strategic plan. As the City Council knows, having participated in the development of the city's new strategic plan, part of our process was after a draft was prepared, we were posting a copy of the draft plan on the website, and we're encouraging residents to go. They can download it, they can read it online, but more importantly, they could submit any comments that they want. So for approximately the next month, the strategic plan is going to be posted on the city's website or available on the city's website. And we'd ask residents to go on there, give us their comments, and then in approximately a month, we'll shut that down. And then we will bring those comments and results back to the City Council, along with a timeline on how the various aspects of the strategic plan are going to be implemented over the next 3 to 5 years. And that will all come back to you at your first meeting in December. So we will also be putting out, I think, a press release and some other things to really publicize this for the residents and hopefully encourage them to go and view it and give us their honest feedback and comments. I will say this is not a blog. People will actually have to leave their email addresses and contact information if they want to leave comments, but I think that's important if people are going to leave us comments that we can engage in a dialogue with these residents and their ideas, and that they're just not anonymous comments. Be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
I'll just show everyone how to get there. You want to click on What's New, and down here, Strategic Planning Report. And that will bring up the City of Lake Forest would like to receive your input. You can click here, and people can download the entire document. They can read it online, or they can print it out. It's a draft, again, as Bob mentioned. And then we would like to have them submit their suggestions and ideas to this email address here. And they just click on that.
Thank you, Susan. And that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Bob. Our next item on the agenda this evening is comments by council members, the first being Property and Public Lands Committee, Alderman Schoenheider.
Thank you, Mayor Cowhey. Going back 5 years, then Mayor Rummel appointed a task force and a committee to begin to study and get involved in some dialogue regarding the Laurel Avenue former municipal services site. Believe it or not, it's been almost 3 years, I guess now, since MS has moved from Laurel Avenue over to Field Drive. And what came out of that task force was an RFQ for consultancy services. We retained a firm to help us begin the process of exposing the property to the market, soliciting community input, and kind of doing some strategy for us relative to what we believe the right use for that property was. During the time that, after the time that we actually kind of kicked that process off, needless to say, the world changed greatly in that period of 4 or 5 years. So we've been a bit on hold relative to progress with Laurel Avenue. We've not been sitting still, however. During the last 3 years, we've been engaged in some environmental remediation on the site, done some environmental studies. We know a lot more about the property than we did 4 or 5 years ago. And needless to say, the property continues to really physically deteriorate, as no one's been occupying the property for over 3 years. So the Property and Public Lands Committee has really made an effort to find really a solution for Laurel Avenue, a real priority. And so we've had ongoing discussions over the last several months and really believe that it makes a great deal of sense to explore some different alternatives and some vehicles to encourage development of that particular site. And one of those vehicles obviously available to us as a community is tax increment financing, or TIF. So we've looked at a couple of different alternatives. We explored and spoke with several different consultants. We received proposals from them, met with 3 of them, and tonight we're bringing to you a recommendation that the city engage Tesca and Associates and their partner to help us begin the process of looking at a TIF incentive package and an overall strategy, again, kind of not just refreshing, but really taking a new look given kind of the new reality of the marketplace, everything going on, what we know about the site, what we know about the conditions of the market, what we know about the property. So we've received these RFPs. We have received 3 good responses, had 3 interviews, and again, chosen Tesca. And we'd like to get, what we're asking for tonight is the Property and Public Lands Committee is to get council approval to engage Tesca in a ongoing study for them. The idea would be they will provide technical assistance as we proceed to evaluate TIF as an alternative. They'll help us understand market conditions relative to the property and its future use. And really, again, continue to get public input, raise public awareness about the site and the intent of the community to redevelop that site in a positive way. Kathy, would you mind just quickly, and I want to mention a couple of things while Kathy puts up a quick timeline. Number one, the Property and Public Lands Committee is really going to kind of shepherd this process through. We want to keep control of what's happening. As Kathy's put up a timeline, so you can kind of see this is not an overnight process, certainly. You begin to establish some responsibility charts. We'll review the work, and Tesca will begin to get engaged in some market analysis, begin to do some preliminary developer interviews, inquire as to market conditions, get some public review and public input, certainly in the process, which will be critical as we go forward. And then the other piece I want to mention is this is not a decision to do a TIF on this site. This is a decision tonight to go forward to continue to understand if TIF is a viable option for us on this property. And if it is, what are the strategies and what are the processes that will be involved in doing that. The other player in this obviously will be the Plan Commission, and they'll be actively involved in this process as well. So tonight what we're asking for is the approval of the contract with Tesca, $47,500. So we can begin to take the next step in the strategy, the planning, and potentially in the future implementation of TIF for Laurel Avenue. And I'm open to questions.
We didn't competitively bid this.
We got 3 proposals, Bob, and we got 3 proposals, right? No, 6
Yeah.
proposals, thank you. 6 proposals, we narrowed it down to 3. And so we got a broad range of kind of different options. The Tesca proposal was kind of in the middle of the range in terms of pricing, but we felt like it offered both the right mix of kind of the technical skill set as well as the market skill set and the market information piece. So we felt like we have used Tesca in the past. We actually engaged Tesca for some preliminary analysis on the site maybe 6 or 8 months ago, and felt like they did a nice job with that, and it was the appropriate choice. Any other
And
questions?
just, I know this has been described before, but the scope of the area that's being examined for a potential TIF would just be the municipal services site, nothing beyond.
And Kent, that was one of the things we have talked about, and the scope of this particular project and the focus of this will be the MS site only.
Okay.
And we did explore alternatives, but came back to this ultimately.
I know, Mike or Randy, any other comments?
Only that there are 3 of us aldermen on the committee, and we did interview ultimately 3 prospective candidates, and independently we ranked them in order of preference, and all 3 of us had identical rankings.
Each brought, various skill sets, various experiences, but we felt like Tesca and their team really had a good mix of both the technical as well as the market aspects. So,
Any other questions for Don?
Just curiosity, did Tesca assist us with the west side TIF?
they did, right.
Okay, so we do have a track record.
We do have a
with
track
them.
record with the firm.
If not, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Roll.
Clarification and motion would be with the modification we discussed during the
Right.
phase.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Novit,
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck,
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon,
Aye.
Alderman Schoenheider,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Adelman,
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, motion passes.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Alderman Schoenheider. Any other comments by council members this evening? No? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is items for the omnibus vote consideration. There are 5. I will read the 5 items and proceed from there. The first being a check register for period June 23rd to June 27, 2012. The second being the approval of a contract with Foley and Lardner LLP for bond counsel services for Special Service Area 25, 26, and 29 bond refinancing. Third being approval of a contract for capital improvement project. This is the revetment wall study, Forest Park Beach. The fourth being a consideration of ordinances approving recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is a first reading and if desired by the City Council, final approval as well. And the fifth being approval of the September 4, 2012 regular City Council minutes. Any questions or comments on those 5 items?
Make a motion to approve the omnibus items as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Novit,
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck,
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon,
Aye.
Alderman Schoenheider,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Adelman,
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you, Karina. Our next item on the agenda this evening is ordinances. The first being a consideration of an ordinance granting a special use permit, approving the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital Campus Master Plan, and establishing conditions of approval. Kathy Cerniak is presenting. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to start, and then I will turn it over to the city attorney for further comments on the details of the ordinance. I want to step back just for a minute for anyone who may be unfamiliar with this item. This is a request for a special use permit for Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital to adopt a new campus master plan. The master plan is a high-level document. The master plan does not include detailed plans either for the overall site or for the building. What the master plan does is it states the council's support for the revitalization of the hospital campus. It establishes a framework for future decisions, and it establishes development parameters. The key components of the master plan is broken into phases. The first phase of the master plan, the key component is the construction of a replacement hospital, which is targeted for opening in 2017. Another key component of the first phase is ingress and egress improvements at the perimeters of the hospital campus. Another key component is perimeter buffers. There was much discussion about how the hospital campus interfaces and will interface with the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding uses. In a later phase, the master plan begins to speak to the reuse of the existing hospital campus, which is identified for future use as educational and research purposes. And then, as I mentioned at the start of discussion of this slide, is the concept of phase development. Not surprisingly, the hospital knows the most about what will occur in this first phase. So the master plan is more detailed in this phase. And as we go forward, there are opportunities and requirements for continued review as future phases or sub-phases of the master plan come forward. Just to bring you up to date, what has occurred to date? The Plan Commission spent 9 months considering this proposal. They began last September, first hearing an informational meeting, continued with a December meeting, and then had 3 more meetings in the spring of 2012. All of those meetings were public meetings. The Plan Commission received a great deal of testimony, both in writing and verbal testimony. The Plan Commission, at the outset, identified a number of issues, a number of areas of focus, ranging from traffic issues to lighting impacts on neighboring property owners, landscaping, building form, and all of those elements were thoroughly discussed and were addressed through the recommendations that were presented by the Plan Commission to the City Council. At your June meeting, the City Council saw those recommendations, 20-plus recommendations from the Plan Commission, and at that time the City Council gave first reading to the ordinance with the direction to the City Attorney, staff, representatives of the hospitals, to take those recommendations from the Plan Commission, refine those, detail those appropriately, and that's what has been occurring since that June meeting. You now have before you, we are tonight at the point of consideration of final approval of the ordinance. What you have before you is an ordinance that still accurately and thoroughly represents the recommendations from the Plan Commission. Those recommendations have been recategorized. They have been enhanced. There has been legal language added. But in particular, the conditions around the process going forward and the conditions around how to provide assurance that the hospital is responsible for the costs directly related to this project and future operations of the hospital. Those were the 2 components that really required the most discussion since your June meeting. Just to look ahead, once this final approval is granted, the master plan is in place, the city staff will work closely with both the ad hoc planning group, that is a recommendation in the ordinance, which would be appointed by the city manager, and the hospital team to work through detailed plans. Those plans will be brought forward to the Plan Commission at a public meeting and would ultimately come back before the City Council for final approval. And that's just to conclude my portion of this presentation. Again, the key components of the ordinance, consistent with the Plan Commission's discussion and recommendation to the City Council, the ordinance does the following. It provides for an enhanced process, an enhanced review process going forward. The Plan Commission recognized that revitalization of the hospital campus is really a project that's much larger in scope than our boards and commissions are normally faced with. They recognize that the Plan Commission had spent 9 months becoming familiar, learning the details, and understanding what was to occur. So the enhanced process provided for in the ordinance allows for the Plan Commission to remain involved and assures that the City Council is involved as those detailed plans come forward. The conditions address road improvements, require a future traffic study as future phases unfold. They provide protection to the neighborhood. They encourage appropriate design, and with a real look toward constructing a sustainable campus that can really be at the cutting edge of some of the green technologies. And finally, as I mentioned, the ordinance assures that the hospital will cover appropriate costs. And with that, I'm going to look to the city attorney and ask him to step in at this point.
Thank you, Kathy. Members, Mayor Cowhey, members of the council, I think Kathy's overview is actually quite thorough and probably will eclipse much of what I was going to say, but I will note a few things, and then I'll do a very quick walkthrough of the ordinance. We do have a very detailed review of the master plan by the Plan Commission. Two of the things that you'll find as exhibits to the proposed special use permit ordinance are in fact the master plan itself and the Plan Commission recommendations. Those are really the guideposts by which the ordinance was crafted. The ordinance, importantly, does not approve any specific development. Rather, as Kathy said, it creates a framework based on the master plan, provides some assurances both for the city and for the hospital and for the residents nearby to know what is going to be forthcoming on the hospital campus. And with that understanding, it then creates a framework so that detailed plans can actually be developed, reviewed, and evaluated in a manner that is at least proceeding with a high level of understanding as set forth in the Plan Commission recommendation and the master plan itself. If you want to follow along with me, I'll start on page 91 of your packet just to give a very quick overview of what the ordinance does. You may recall that the ordinance that you reviewed in first reading, I guess I would refer to it almost as a summary of the Plan Commission recommendations and a conceptual outline of what needed to be done. This ordinance is really much more detailed in its phrasing and in its terminology in order to actually create a more implementable document, if you will. So we do give the background on pages 90 and 91, and those recitals are incorporated. We grant the specific approval of a special use permit for the master plan subject to the terms of this ordinance, and this is where we'll go forward. Importantly, one of the conditions, and right off at the outset, is condition A. This does not authorize any work. What it does is establish the framework for moving forward through what are termed detailed plans, which as you get into page 92 and 94 through 94, we talk about what is required for a detailed plan. That's on page 93. We also set out both the bodies involved for the review and the steps that they'll go through to undertake that review. As Kathy mentioned, there's an advisory committee that is anticipated. It's something that the city manager is charged with putting together with some direction under the ordinance for the council. This is intended to be a roll-up-your-sleeves type of committee that's going to be working with staff, with the hospital, in order to really try to focus on what is being proposed and tested, if you will, against the master plan principles and the terms of the ordinance. You'll note that the members of that committee are expected to have certain types of expertise so that they'll be able to provide some sophisticated input on what's being considered. Once an application for detailed plan is presented, it's going to go through our typical process of staff review, and it's going to then go to the Plan Commission. Now, importantly, the Plan Commission review, since we've already had, as Kathy mentioned, 8 months of public hearing, is not intended to be a full-blown tabula rasa type of public hearing. It's intended to be a public meeting at which the plan will be reviewed, evaluated, and recommended in some fashion or other. It could involve changes, it could involve remanding. During that phase, we will make sure that there is compliance with the terms of this ordinance, with the principles of the master plan, with the findings of the Plan Commission, as well as with the various ordinances. That Plan Commission recommendation will then be forwarded to the City Council. Any final plan that will allow the hospital to get a building permit for the campus is going to have to first be approved by the City Council. So I guess it's fair to say that the buck stops there. And at that point, the council can make the determination whether that plan is consistent with the principles set forth in the master plan and the requirements set forth in this ordinance. And only after the City Council gives that green light can permits be sought for actual construction. There are a few exceptions for types of permits that can be obtained without the detailed plan, such as interior renovations. Applications can be made for permits from other agencies, but ultimately those other agency permits usually will not involve nor allow any work until the city also issues a local permit. So we do have the City Council with the ultimate control over any final development. I should also note, and you'll see this not only here but elsewhere, that it is contemplated that there will be detailed plans coming forward in phases or even sub-phases. If you look at the master plan as Kathy described, there are several large phases that are presented. Obviously, as she said, first phase is a little bit more discrete, the others are a little more general. But even within each of those phases, there can be smaller portions of that coming forward, so it could be done incrementally. Road improvements and traffic, obviously a big concern, something that had been discussed at length with the Plan Commission. You'll find in Part C, starting on page 94, going through 96, that there's a series of areas and considerations and activities that need to be addressed and completed as part of the program. I think one of the key ones you'll see at the top of page 95 of the packet, namely the northerly access from Route 41 to the campus. It's anticipated that that's going to be in place before the first part of construction begins, so that the construction traffic itself is going to be borne in that manner rather than coming off of Deerpath or Waukegan. There is some flexibility there because of timing of permitting, but the objective is going to be very clearly to have that in place so that the construction traffic is not going to burden local roads, local traffic. You'll also see that there are parameters set forth for the Deerpath Westmoreland intersection. Everyone already knows that that's a difficult stretch of road for a variety of reasons, many of which having nothing to do with the hospital, much of it having to do with the intersection of 41 and Deerpath and the way that that's controlled, or some would say not controlled. But there are parameters there to make sure that that intersection and the work and access on Deerpath is going to not cause any harm. We have a baseline traffic study which is discussed in point 6 on page 95, and really that's going to be the point of measuring how the hospital's development is going to impact our roads. We know what the status is right now, and we're going to have interim updates on those traffic studies to make sure that the expectations that are set forth in that baseline traffic study are actually achieved and consistent with the development. If we find that they get out of whack, that's going to actually affect the types of improvements that will be required of the hospital as it goes forward with the detailed plans. There's also specific provisions addressing the impact of traffic on the neighborhoods, both in terms of buffering and in terms of interconnections. And I think the last major point under traffic is that the hospital will be funding the initial intersection design study for the Route 41 Deerpath intersection. As we know, it's a troublesome intersection. It's something that the Illinois Department of Transportation controls, but they do not do anything without an intersection design study, and the kickoff for that is something that is an expense to be borne by the hospital up to the limit of $31,900. I should note that that's 110% of the amount that has been quoted to do that study by a well-recognized traffic engineering firm. The building height and design section, which you'll find on pages 96 through 97, are really restatements of the matters that are set forth in the master plan and in the Plan Commission recommendation. I think probably the most significant point in there is in the asterisk that starts on 96 and carries over, and that is with respect to the one area which is sort of the central part of the campus, and how the height is going to relate to the mechanicals. It's really going to be based on line of sight issues, and that's something that's going to have to be demonstrated by the hospital, but it does allow a little bit of flexibility on the ultimate height. Again, it's something that the Plan Commission recommendation was pretty thorough in its discussion. The sustainability and design and open space issues, again, largely reflecting what's in the master plan and the Plan Commission findings. You'll see that set forth in paragraphs or pages 97 through 99. I think a couple of things which are very key. The amount of open space. This is something which is not just a matter of the plan now, it's specific in the ordinance. These are standards that have to be met, and they are set forth specifically. Wetland preservation and mitigation. Again, the objective is that they must meet all requirements for any kind of wetland modifications, and there's a series of preferences as far as the locale and watershed for the mitigation of any wetlands that are modified. The other thing which is of considerable concern, again, it's reflected in the comprehensive or in the master plan, but specifically set forth in the ordinance, is the perimeter buffering for the neighboring properties, and that you'll see specifically on page 98. Also 98 and 99 goes into the lighting plan. The notion is to keep the lighting directed inward, trying to be consistent with the dark at night standards that are generally reflective of the city. As Kathy mentioned, one of the major issues that came up in the course of this, and was a point generally discussed by the Plan Commission in its recommendation, but required a lot of thorough thinking in terms of the financial impact of the hospital redevelopment. The notion was that the hospital needs to pay its own way. That's a hard thing to actually measure, because there are so many different ways that can be measured. And I think that the hospital and the city staff worked very hard to try to come up with meaningful and measurable ways of establishing impacts that would also be fair both to the city and to the hospital. I think that, and these are pretty detailed provisions, I'll be more than happy to discuss them in greater detail if you like, but I think I'll give an overview right now. The general notions are that there are certain improvements that they'll have to take care of. Those are the off-site roadway improvements discussed earlier in the ordinance, as well as any specific roadway improvements that become apparent in the course of any detailed plan review. Other infrastructure improvements also are things that, to the extent directly related to the hospital, will be the responsibility of the hospital to bear. To the extent that the hospital is a contributor as opposed to the cause of an improvement, the ordinance provides that they're going to pay their pro rata share. Please note that with respect to anything with respect to our enterprise funded improvements in systems, namely water and sewer, those are things that would be handled primarily through our connection fees and water rates. All the private infrastructure that's to be happening on the campus, again, something that the hospital is responsible for, and there's a provision for security to make sure that that's going to be done. There is recognition that the hospital is a not-for-profit entity, and that the character of many of the improvements are things that are more inwardly rather than outwardly directed, and so there is some flexibility built in to the ordinance to allow modifications and adjustments to the security, but that's going to be determined on a case-by-case basis as the detailed plans come forward. With respect to fees and costs, the hospital will be paying whatever the freight is for anybody else in the city when they come to get a permit based on what our ordinances provide. And that includes third-party reimbursements. We have ordinances on the books, and they're going to have to abide by them. With respect to additional costs, and I think this is really where the lion's share of the discussions were focused upon, I think that there were some things which were difficult to quantify. One of which was, what is the impact of roadways on roadways of the hospital? Not so much the capital aspects, we've already addressed that, but really the operational aspects, the maintenance, the wear and tear, the the plowing and the like. And I don't think that anyone was able to come up with a good metric for that. And so I think as an alternative, and I think it's fair to say that both the staff and the hospital felt that this was a fair alternative, the provision in section 7A on page 100 and 101 was the approach for resolving the metric for the roadways, namely the segment of Westmoreland, which extends northerly of Deerpath to a little bit beyond the driveway of the Lake Forest Club, is something that is city roadway, and the city has been maintaining and otherwise taking care of it. That's going to be offloaded to the hospital. The hospital will be responsible to take care of that to the same extent as the city would based on city standards. And that has been a point of concern with the city staff for some time because of just the operational, I don't want to call it difficulty, it's just ambiguity as to how to handle some of those things and make it integrate with what the hospital is doing for the rest of the Westmoreland right-of-way. Now it's going to be a little more seamless, but the standards are in place. With respect to the other city facilities, water consumption and demand has been handled both here and elsewhere. One of the things that we want to make sure of is that to the extent that there is going to be any additional strain on the water system based on the improvements at the hospital, those are going to be identified, quantified, and adjusted in terms of how the city is going to impose its connection fees and rates. So as connection fees are sought for new buildings, they will be paying the freight in that manner. The last segment of services that we wanted to make sure were properly addressed for public safety, fire, police, paramedic. And here we looked at it from a two-lens perspective. One was revenue that's already provided from the hospital through property taxes, and two was the cost of those services based on the number of calls and demands that are put on the system together. We started with an assumption that current tax payments are essentially balanced by current demand for services. And from there, we have set up a series of standards which are based on modifications or adjustments that actually occur in how much revenue the hospital pays with an adjustment for cost of living, and the amount of calls that are made based on actual calls and measured against baselines. And again, we have the baselines that will be incorporated into the ordinance. The provisions here do provide that if there is some material adjustment in the demands upward or reduction in the revenue downward, there will be a compensating payment by the hospital to the city. Note that if everything stays the same or if the demand goes down, there is no there's no refund. Excuse me. There is some allowance for fluctuation. There's also a true-up that's going to happen on a triennial basis. There's also some equitable adjustment because we were trying to be fairly discreet as to the different types of services. We also recognize that there may be times where, for example, fire calls are up, police calls are down, and how is that to be accomplished? We have set up a formula in the ordinance for an equitable adjustment for that. That really carries us through from pages 101 through 103. After that, there are some general provisions in the ordinance regarding internal security of the campus and how it impacts surrounding properties, the requirement for substantial compliance of the detailed plans to the, or conformity with the detailed plans to the master plan, and then how we would adjust the master plan. It would have to go through a public hearing. If there are material changes between where the hospital wishes to go and what the master plan had provided. And then finally, we have some general conditions to assure the compliance with laws, enforcement, what happens if there's any kind of transfer, and the timeframes for redevelopment. So that is I guess I wanted to make it quick order, but maybe it wasn't so quick. A summary of what the ordinance says. It's actually even more detailed than what I've provided, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Vic, for that brief comment.
It's all relative.
It's, seriously, I know that the Plant Commission spent 9 months on this. It's been back and forth within the community for the last couple of years. I know the city attorney and the Northwestern staff has spent literally hundreds of hours on it as well. But any questions or comments from the council?
I got the marked up draft, we all did on Friday, and I have every confidence that it probably follows the first one that we approved, and
In spirit.
it has those. Well, the fact is, trying to read through all the editing caused me to basically lose my eyesight. It would be helpful.
If you go to the hospital, they may be able to help you.
No, there was too long a waiting line. Too small a hospital. It would be helpful to me to put it off to the next meeting. I don't think it's a deal killer. I'll abstain if you want to push it through, but it would be helpful. I would have more comfort if I could just go through and say, you know, it's a 33-page or whatever document. I actually have read it and carefully. So.
I have a tendency to agree with Bob. I want to keep this on a narrow timeline, and I want things to progress, but I just, in all fairness, I have to weigh what's in the document and digest it. Maybe my attention span's getting too short at this point, but I just need, maybe through the next council meeting, to work through it.
I agree as well, and that's not based on any problem or that I have with anything that I saw in the document. It's, I think, extremely well crafted, and I know a huge amount of work was put into it, but at this point I would probably appreciate.
And we'll have the benefit of being able to play back Vic's comments at our leisure.
Any other comments from council? Is it the desire of the council, therefore, to put this off till October 1?
Would you like a motion? I move that we basically table this for consideration until the next council meeting.
Second.
Can I just ask one question, or maybe it's a favor? I know that it's been reported here, a lot of work has gone into getting this new draft and so forth together. I guess what I would ask is that as you read through it over the course of the next 2 weeks, if you have any comments or questions, that you contact either Kathy or Vic or myself, so that when we come back to this council chamber on August 1st, that hopefully we've answered any questions you've had as you've gone through it. And that evening, we're in a position to either vote it up or vote it down. I think we owe that to the hospital. As the mayor has indicated, we have been reviewing this a long time. I do recognize that you just got this on Friday as the attorneys were going back and forth and putting the final touches on this thing. And it is a lengthy document, and I realize that, but I think to try and proceed forward, any reactions, either positive or negative, if you could please convey that to us as quickly as possible, we would appreciate that.
We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. We'll put it on the agenda for October 1. Our next item on the agenda is a consideration of ordinance amending the city code pertaining to the Aloha Farm Commission. City Manager Bob Cowhey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Excuse me 1 second while I get back to the start of the agenda. At the last city council meeting, you did approve first reading of an ordinance reestablishing the Aloha Commission. This evening, there's actually 2 actions that are before you. First would be second reading of the ordinance, and then if you were to approve second reading of the ordinance this evening, then the next action would be the formal appointment of the members of the Aloha Farms Commission as set forth in your agenda packet.
Any questions for Bob? If not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Alderman Novit?
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck?
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon?
Aye.
Alderman Schoenheider?
Aye.
Alderman Tack? Alderman Palmer?
Aye.
Alderman Adelman?
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you, Karina. That brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is new business. Bob, anything? No?
Nope.
Any other? If not,
We do have the appointment of the members.
Was that wrapped up in your motion?
I believe it is included in the motion, I assume.
Okay.
Do you want it to amend it, or?
Also reflect in the minutes.
Okay, very good. Any other additional items for council discussion this evening? If not, I entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.